Hello citizens and welcome back. I've been seeing a lot more discussion about the crime and law system in Star Citizen and the recent changes coming to prisons in 3.18. In this video, I would like to discuss those changes, what's wrong with the law system currently, and what can CIG do about it in the long term. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. Also, if you didn't know, we have a Discord server which you can join through the link in the description. And of course, here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the armory. Also, channel memberships on YouTube are now enabled, so if you would like to go the extra mile, you can click that join button. Alright, let's get to the video. Let's start with the changes coming in 3.18. First of all, SPK is getting a major overhaul in terms of gameplay. The station will be abandoned no more, Crusader security will be patrolling the interior and the landing pads and will defend the station from any attackers. This comes with several other changes. First, after defeating all the guards and the main guard, the attackers will be able to open the vault, which will distribute valuable items. On top of this, attacking the station will generate a counter mission for bounty hunters to defend the station. Now, to incentivize players to do this, CIG will remove all other locations where players can clear their crime stats, meaning that SPK will be the only place where we will be able to do so, which will make it somewhat more difficult depending on how derpy the AI will be and how many players will respond to the defend mission. This gives us a very interesting change to how clearing crime stat works, though I am not sure if it necessarily makes it more difficult as CIG and some of the members of the community stated. CIG is also adding more gameplay to prisons, more missions, more areas and more ways to leave the prison. This should make prisons more engaging and maybe keep people from just logging out when they get arrested. Now, these new features will make the existing prison gameplay a bit more interesting. However, they don't solve the underlying issues that cause most of the frustration with the current system. The changes to crime stat clearing might actually make some of them worse. For example, if a player gets a crime stat wrongfully because they looked at an elevator wrong, they'll have to be forced to either accumulate more crime stat and risk a longer sentence to clear that crime stat, or accept the current one. Now, serving time in prison might be less annoying with the new features, depending on how engaging they will actually be and whether they will work. The problem is that the new features do not address the major issues of the law and criminality system in Star Citizen. And before we get into what those issues are and how to fix them, let's take a look at what components is the system made of and how they work. First, you need to define laws and regulations. These would likely mirror real life. Killing is bad, stealing is bad, parking in someone's spot is bad. Then you throw in some Star Citizen relevant stuff like quantum interdictions without cause are bad, deactivating comrades is bad. Then you can assign consequences to each wrongful action. Every faction or area will have different consequences for different actions. For example, in Stanton, if you kill someone in monitored space, that's murder, and the local and UEE law enforcement will be after you. But in Pyro, if you kill someone, nobody particularly cares because there is no centralized law enforcement. But killing a member of one of the factions there could hurt your reputation with them. More on that later. So, now that you have all these laws and regulations and you know how they are enforced in different areas, you can move on to detecting them in game. Now, detecting the crime is not exactly the correct expression here, because the game knows everything that's happening within it. What you actually need to do is identify the laws and regulations that apply to certain situations based on the data the game has. There are a few ways to do this, but I believe that CIG is using triggers and events, which means that certain actions like attacking an NPC trigger a check that analyzes the situation and assigns a crime stat based on that. And you could actually split this analysis into its own service separate from the game server, which is what I think CIG is doing. So how does this work? Let's use killing an NPC as an example. This will trigger an event that will be sent to the law service. The event can contain whatever information is needed, like who killed who and what characters were nearby and what was the location. The law service can then determine whether a crime happened and how severe it was. Now, here's where things get complicated. Rarely a crime is committed on its own, and usually there is a delay between the crime being committed and reported. So the law service would have to maintain some kind of context that would look at all the crimes a player has committed during one incident. Also, you can start thinking about how crimes are reported. Should it only be based on the presence of comrade or also witnesses? What happens when you kill all those witnesses, and what if you don't? Is there a delay between the crime being committed and the witnesses reporting it? And this adds layers upon layers of complexity, and I've only just begun. But fortunately, once the base system is established, it can be expanded as needed. So now you have detected and identified a crime. Now it's time to determine the consequences. Right now, that means giving the player a criminal rating or a crime stat, which currently is assigned based on the severity of crimes committed and their number. In the future, the calculation should also include the player's reputation. The problem here is that the current reputation system is pretty rudimentary. Reputation that is currently tracked is very short term. In the future, we should have a longer term, more global faction reputation. For example, if you're a repeat offender in Stanton, the local governments might be more inclined to give you a harsher sentence when you get caught. On the other hand, if you're known as a contributing member of the society, they might be willing to overlook smaller offenses at the cost of some of that reputation. If we take an example from Pyro, if you get on the bad side of one of the factions, they might be more inclined to kill you. On the other hand, if you have good reputation with one of the other factions, they might be more inclined to pay you well and protect you. This long-term reputation system and its consequences is a long-awaited missing link in the law system. But it seems like development is on the way, as there were mentions of prison sentences being adjusted based on your criminal history. Now, having a crime stat doesn't necessarily mean that you will end up in prison. Sure, NPC and player bounty hunters will be after you, but it is possible to evade them. But when you do end up in prison, that's where the law system ends and the prison gameplay begins, which is where most of the upcoming changes are. So now that we have an idea on how the system works, we can take a look at what's wrong with it. Well, it's really simple. The current law system is not great at determining what is a crime and what isn't. You will often find players getting a crime stat through a bug, and it also can't recognize some more complicated situations, which could be attacking someone who is attempting to board your ship, or you entering a bunker to revive someone doing a lawful mission, though the latter is more of a hostility detection problem. Also, with the absence of long-term reputation, after you clear your crime stat, there are no lasting consequences to being a career criminal, like not being allowed to enter some areas or accept certain missions. In conclusion, the problem with the law and crime system in Star Citizen is that it's missing major parts of its functionality. This problem cannot be fixed in the short term, as it depends on many other systems that are only partially implemented. What CAG announced for 3.18 actually makes sense in the short term, as it introduces a few new features and changes up parts of the prison and crime gameplay at a relatively small cost. But ultimately, we will have to see how it works out when 3.18 comes out. With that being said, that's it for tonight. What do you think? Are the new SPK changes going to make life harder for criminal players, or are they just another obstacle for lawful players with accidental crime stats? Let me know in the comments. Fly safe, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the verse.